Deputy Speaker, and it's a real pleasure to follow the member for York Central, who made some very important points around the inequality, really, that exists. And I know that York Central has similarities to my own constituency of Hornsey and Wood Green. Indeed, as the member for West Ham was talking earlier, the enormous amount of people still on benefit, and yet at the same time the Times have just published their wealth tax list, 23 more billionaires who have made money just from the COVID crisis. And one word that we haven't talked about much this afternoon is waste, and I think this debate does need to be looked at in the context of the member for Hackney's investigation, which is a cross-party piece of work on the COVID crisis and how much money was given out in a haphazard way, where had that money not been wasted, it would be available now to assist our constituents feeling the pinch with autumn on its way and with the inflation having an effect on food, having an effect on fuel bills, and indeed having an effect on clothing, shoes and all the other things which we purchase. If my reading of the OBR and IFS documentation is correct, Mr Deputy Speaker, I believe that there has been a 2% reduction in GDP as a result of the scarring from COVID and of 4% from Brexit, and that trading with European partners has gone down from about 63 to 60%. Of course, in percentage terms, that doesn't sound that much, but when you look at how much that actually represents, that's quite a lot, as our main trading partners still. So we are facing an autumn of many difficulties on many fronts, and added to that, it does make one feel nostalgic for the last time we had a surplus budget, which I believe was when Gordon Brown was the Chancellor, which is quite some time ago now. Since then we've had deficit budgets under the Tory administrations. The thing I wanted to highlight, though, was the increased tax burden on many people who do not earn very much money at all. The jobs tax, or the over 1% increase, which will come in next April on jobs and on employers, will lead to a sense of less money in the pocket. And I feel that at this time, when there's still a lot of uncertainty about COVID, there's still a question mark over whether we might have to have increased restrictions in the autumn. This does feel like a bit of a gamble in terms of how much it's placing on working people to carry the can for government mismanagement, waste and increased taxes. Briefly, I wanted to mention, as many other members have, the missed opportunity on climate. Ahead of COP26, we could have seen much more funding for basic measures, for example, asking local authorities to retrofit homes, to provide new boilers, which could be state-of-the-art new boilers. It would also provide an opportunity to train up the 180,000 workers we will need to install heat pumps, and our local authorities would have been grateful for the opportunity to do their bit. Instead, they're scrimping and saving still. Despite the small increase in local government funding, much more could have been done. So we do have the tax cut, however, for flying between Manchester and Heathrow, if that's something which we should be encouraging in this day and age. And of course, when we look back at various green schemes, whether it was the Green New Deal, which was introduced as a sort of a payment on your home back in 2010, under Lord Barker, who is now in the other place, or whether it was the Green Homes Plan, which sort of ran out of steam. It seems again and again the government have missed an opportunity of asking local authorities to deal with their own locality. These green questions work the best when they operate at a local level. My third point is around the productivity puzzle, which of course we all think about day in, day out, and we know that unless we spend more on education, we're not going to actually see the improvements in the long term in our economy, whether that is in early years, and I do welcome the work that was done by the member for Northamptonshire who did the report into early years, but I don't think that the 500 million is going to do what Sure Start did. Many of us have had a number of Sure Start closures and children's centre closures over the years, and this is, to me, reinventing the wheel, too little, too late. Secondly, the Chancellor yesterday talked about tutoring, and I'm a big believer in tutoring, but tutoring often implies that the hours that a young person spends in school are somehow not being productive. How do we use the hours that young people are in school and children are in school in a better way? My own survey of schools shows the teaching staff to be exhausted and for morale to be quite low. And I hope that when the pay review body does its work, that teachers will get a proper increase in their daily work. And why does it have to be tutoring or increasing time that young people can spend in school? We should be looking at both. Certainly also on the question of FE, further education's been cut back by 50% since 2010. I'm very pleased to see that there are some boot camps and that the apprenticeship levy has got new and different ways of being spent. But I think we need to look much more carefully at what works and increase investment in training, in career development, and in that whole area from early years right through to FE and adult education. Kevin Collins has written in today's Times. He, of course, was the education czar under the government, and he thinks that the $5 billion is only a third of what is needed to bring our education system up to what is required. We all want to see our workforce more skilled. We all want to see the productivity gain that would bring. But if Kevin Collins, who is the expert who was commissioned to look into this, says this falls far short, then I think we need to believe that, and we need to do something about it and to do more about it. My final point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is on our high streets, and I'm very proud of my busy London high streets. Speaking of London, I was very sad to see that the Chancellor didn't actually mention the word London in his speech yesterday. It seems to have gone out of vogue. But as people will know who are based in our wonderful capital, we need quite a lot of levelling up ourselves in London. And to give an example, the High Street, the Wood Green High Street, where I'm an MP, we have a number of people walking up and down it, but then when you actually look and ask businesses about the footfall versus the amount being spent, there's plenty of footfall, people are still there, but the numbers, the amounts of money that people are spending have dipped right down. Since 2010, the numbers of transactions and payments to small businesses and to our chains, which are in our mall, have dropped considerably, and that does reflect the analysis from the IFS, which shows that we have had really negative growth or tiny bits of growth in our local areas, and a lot of that is down to these patches where we have high unemployment and we don't have very much in our pockets at all. Our small businesses are very disappointed that despite promising it, and promising it for years now, there was not a proper review of business rates. And I think the Labor proposal to take more as a digital tax from Amazon and top up that small business relief seems to me to be quite a neat solution, and I would ask the government to look at that again. We're letting down small businesses, and we know that small businesses are the lifeblood of all of our communities. On our high streets, we are experiencing a number of problems around lack of occupancy of our shop fronts. I'm particularly cross with the banks. The week before last, I presented a petition about closures of the NatWest branch in Crouch End. And then, lo and behold, as I sat down, the Lloyd's is closing in Muswell Hill. And I not only think this is a terrible waste of that lovely occupied space which they were taking up on the high street, but there's not even a guarantee often that they're going to replace it with an ATM. No. Or a hole in the wall, which means that people won't even stop to maybe buy a sandwich and get some cash out of the cash point. And I think that's the least the Treasury could be doing. Yeah. I believe since 2015 there's been hundreds and hundreds of bank closures, and I would like the Treasury to show a bit of muscle. Yes. And go back to the banks and say, okay, you're closing a branch, so what are you giving us back? Yeah. Why don't we make them work for that tax cut they got yesterday, the $4 billion that they got from the Treasury yesterday, and say, in return, every time a bank is closed on the high street, put in an automatic teller machine so that at least we can get cash out and our high streets are not deserts. We know also that many of our small businesses do it really for the love, and I'm thinking of small shops like the Pretty Shiny Shop in Stroud Greenward and Dunn's Bakery in Crouch End. They're fantastic local employers, that's the thing, and they often have young people working after school, or they have women whose caring responsibilities work around the different shifts, and they're doing their bit for keeping our high streets going. And I'd like to see the Treasury respond in kind to keep them going as well. I also briefly wanted to talk about the vibrant restaurant sector, which of course will benefit from some of the minor adjustments which the Chancellor announced yesterday, and I'm very grateful for that. I couldn't quite follow all of the changes to the alcohol, I'm afraid. It lost me a bit, except that I think that the champagne's going to be cheaper, Mr Deputy Speaker, but I'm sure you know that. I'm sure you were taking notes, Mr Deputy Speaker, as somebody who likes a tipple. But honestly, let's not forget some people don't drink, and we could have spent that time talking about something that mattered more, like fuel bills, like how expensive childcare is, like the fact that people who do a job and are carers don't get any recognition for that in our taxation system. There are so many more things that we could have spent time talking on, but instead I understand that yesterday's announcement was followed by a very funny outing to a brewery where the wrong prop was used. It was the wrong keg of beer, but I'm sure in the wind-ups our shadow ministers will refer to the wrong keg of beer in the press release. I will finish shortly, Mr Deputy Speaker. I just wanted to wind up by saying it's been an excellent debate. There's lots that we actually do have in common, but that we face a number of challenges. I would like us to be much more focused on how we can help our constituents through this very tough and uncertain period where the autumn is going to lead to a Christmas of shortages, of very high fuel bills, of expensive food, clothing, shoes, and of looking at a very modest increase to the minimum wage, which could really be a living wage if we tried harder and make it a real £10 an hour. And I do hope that the Treasury will look again at some announcements this weekend when COP is in town, so that we can be even more pleased to be in a leadership role there, and specifically looking at the role of local government on day-to-day measures to improve our environment. Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker.